What's up YouTube? Brandon here. Today we're going to be going over knife fighting grip positioning. There's basically two principal variations of grips. There's the standard grip, which is a tip up, and then there is the reverse grip or ice pick grip, some people call it, and this is tip down. There are strengths and weaknesses to each, and we're going to go through those. Okay? So, starting with the hammer grip. This is the hammer grip. Okay, this is just your fingers are wrapped around, your thumb is kind of locking everything in. This is a good grip. It has good reach. It has good slashing potential. It has good blade retention. You're unlikely to slip or be disarmed unless it's a leveraged disarm. Additionally, it can stab effectively in palm up position and mid supinated position. Has a little bit more difficulty with palm down position just because if your thumb is gripped around here, you have to wing out a little bit further to get an effective stab, but it can still do it. Principal weakness of this grip is that you don't quite have the dexterity of some of the modified hammer grips, and additionally, you're not going to have quite the stabbing potential that an ice pick grip would have, but it's pretty good. So that's the first variation. This is a hammer grip. Okay, the first variation of the hammer grip is known as a saber grip, and basically all the other variations of this hammer grip are saber grips, or modified ones. So the traditional saber grip is this position. Okay, so the hammer grip's here, you're just moving your thumb. If your dagger or knife has a thumb ramp or a cross guard, this is going to be behind that and braced against it, okay? This grip is slightly better than the traditional hammer grip in terms of reach because you can push the tip a little bit further. Also, you can slash a little bit more effectively, again, because you can pull the tip through. You also have just a little bit more dexterity in how you move the knife. It's just a little more precise, and particularly your palm down thrust, you can keep it tighter to your body, whereas if your thumb's here, it makes you want to kind of wing out a little bit. If your thumb's here, you can treat it almost like a jab and just thrust straight out. You can transition very quickly from thrusting to stabbing and keep a real tight box. This grip, just like the hammer, can cut, slice in all the planes, and it can stab effectively in palm up, mid palm, and palm down thrusting. However, because you don't have all the thumb wrapped around the blade, you're going to give up a little bit of your stabbing power unless you've really trained a lot with this, because there's potential. I know I've done it. I have disarmed myself in sparring with training knives. Someone comes in, you parry and you stab them in their fencing mask, and it strips the blade out because you don't have that firm grip. So that's something to consider. All right, so next variation we're going to go over, this is another variation of the saber grip. So we had hammer grip, saber grip. Now, this is a modification of the saber grip. This is more specifically for daggers or double-sided blades, but daggers in particular with a cross guard, but I'll show it to you anyway. So this modification of the saber grip, you're putting your thumb on the ricasso, which is this flat area here, so you're putting your thumb here and you're holding it with a blade oriented towards your body. Now if it's a dagger, it doesn't matter because both sides will be sharpened and symmetrical. The idea of this is that it's a really powerful thrusting attack. So if you're in false lead, you can grab your opponent and just go to town. You know, traditional, I guess you would say, like a prison style, you know, shanking attack. Or even old school dagger manuals, this is what they teach, just coming in like this. The reason for the blade orientation is because it's going to be easier to penetrate ribs in the horizontal plane than the vertical plane. Because this is going to slide through, this will meet some resistance. Also, traditional daggers will have a cross guard, but they'll actually have a cutout right here that allows your thumb to rest comfortably on the blade and kind of nestle right in there. So it really promotes this style of thrusting, which is very, very strong. You're using your hips and your low back to come in and you're pulling your opponent in, almost like a Muay Thai knee kick. Downside of this grip is you're extremely limited on slashing, the angles that you can do, and you can't really effectively do a palm down thrust. You're pretty much stuck with either the mid supinated thrust or the palm up thrust. So just something to consider, but if you get in close, you can get a grip. This is a great grip to have, or if you're fighting with a dagger, that is designed for this. All right, next variation of the saber grip is similar to the dagger one we just went over with the thumb. The difference is now you're flipping the blade over. the thumb remains on the ramp like a traditional saber grip, but you're taking the index and you're bringing it onto the ricasso, and the blade is orientated out. This is similar to this grip, but because the index finger and the thumb are in different positions, this one is very effective at slicing. You can slash in all the planes. You can thrust in all the planes. In fact, this particular grip feels the best for me, as it allows me really quick range of motion changes and slicing, and it's very precise. This is kind of like my my detail work grip, if you would say. However, because you only have 3 fingers surrounding the blade, it's one of the weakest grips you can have. So this is a grip I principally use in, say, knife fencing, like when it's a point-based thing and I just want to tag the hand and get out, or just a quick slice thrust. Because if someone's really going after you, there's a high likelihood that you could disarm yourself in this grip, particularly if you're thrusting, it runs into them and you just peel it out. So this is a good grip for kind of point sparring. I'm not sure about the validity of it against, you know, a really aggressive, non-compliant opponent. I've practiced with this grip, just stabbing hard objects, and it really wants to disarm me when I'm doing this. So use this grip with, you know, with caution. Train it a lot if you plan to use this. All right. The last variation with the hammer grip, or saber grip, the modified hammer, which is a saber grip. I've seen this one called a Filipino grip. So the traditional saber grip is here. The Filipino grip, you're basically moving up on the blade and you're resting your thumb on the back of the spine here. The strength of this grip is that it really facilitates good, powerful slashing attacks. Now, I'm not particularly a big fan of slashing attacks because there's a plethora of evidence that shows that thrusting attacks are more effective. However, I get why they would do this, because in an environment like the Philippines, it's hot, it's humid, people are probably only wearing tank tops and, you know, board shorts. So slashing attacks would be much more effective than, say, here in the United States where it's cooler, people are wearing multiple layers, and slashing really is not that effective. Even if someone's just wearing a jacket and shirt, if you try to do a good slash, it's very unlikely you're going to do significant damage through the clothing. So thrusting is better. This grip is not really ideal for thrusting. This is a very slash cutting oriented grip. Additionally, if you didn't pull through correctly on your cut, if you didn't do a nice draw cut, if you did more of a jam cut, if the force was big enough, it could push this back and injure your thumb. So there's another downside to it, but I mean, it does have a place. It's just, you know, use with caution, know your audience, so to speak. All right, so just to recap, with the hammer grip and its variations, we have traditional hammer grip, we have saber grip, we have Filipino grip, we have the modified saber grip with the thumb here. This is more the dagger fighting variation. We have the other side with the thumb here and the index. So those are the basic variations for the tip-up or hammer grip. All right, so we went over the hammer grip. Let's go over the ice pick. The ice pick generally is more conducive towards very powerful thrusting attacks, particularly this downward thrust, just raking the opponent like this. I mean, you can go in through the clavicle, go for the, you know, you can go for the carotid, you can go for the subclavian, you could even go for the heart if you're behind. And this is a very, very powerful, probably the most powerful thrust you can do with a knife. It gets that power because it's utilizing, because of the position, you're in this kind of mid-supinated position. It gets most of its power from your hips and your shoulder, and your back, like your scapula and all that. So that's why it has more power, and it also has gravity. So you can just do this. Also, it's good for close-in work because you don't have to wind up as much as the saber grip or the hammer grip. You can just cut really quickly inside, almost like a Mike Tyson, like a boxer who likes to come in and just work the inside with the uppercuts and the uppercuts and the hooks. This is a good grip for that. The downside of this grip is that you're giving up a little bit of range. It's not a lot of range, it's only a couple inches, but if you're fighting someone who knows what they're doing, that couple inches can make a big difference. Additionally, you're a little bit more limited in the angles that you can cut, and you're also a little more limited in the angles at which you can thrusts. For example, this thrust is really not a practical thrust, and I can't do really a mid straight thrust. I can do a palm down thrust pretty effectively, especially after a slash or whatever. And I can also do this downwards, we call it a 1 and 4, those two angles, kind of hacking ice pick thrust. So those are very effective. But you're giving up a little range for it. This is the basic ice pick, so you can see the grip is very strong. Very unlikely to get disarmed here unless you get leverage disarmed. So it's a good grip, especially if you like to do quick jabs and thrusts. Alright, first variation of the ice pick grip. Very similar. Only difference is this is the regular ice pick. You're going to take your thumb and you're going to rest it over the butt of the weapon here. Okay? The idea behind this is that you're going to get a little bit more downward and just thrusting potential without the potential for the blade to slide up. And that's pretty much it. Everything else is the same as the regular ice pick. For me personally, if I'm in ice pick, I generally just do this one because I have a nice choil here that's going to prevent me from sliding up on the blade. If you had a straight dagger with no crossguard and no choil, then this grip might be better to prevent this from sliding up and destroying, lacerating the inside of your hand. But for my purposes, if you have a choil or a crossguard, this grip, I don't really see it as having any significant advantage, so I'd just stick with the regular ice pick. Alright, the last variation, which I don't like at all, although it has one real strength. This is same ice pick grip, but now it's a blade in position. These grips are contingent upon a blade with one edge, or maybe just a little bit of a sharpened false edge. If you have daggers, it's completely different, somewhat different. But for this knife, the blade in, the principal strength of this grip is that you can do your really powerful downward thrusting motion, and then you can pull back, doing a really lot of damage. That's the only upside to this grip. If you have a knife this size, pulling it towards you, fighting, what if you get redirected and pulled across your midsection? There's a lot of downsides to this grip, so don't particularly advocate it, but I've seen it, so I figured I'd show you. The last one I'll show you is kind of a variation of the ice pick. You're in the ice pick position, and I've seen this called a forearm grip, which I think it's just a modified ice pick. But basically what you're doing is, instead of being in this 90-degree here where you can hook and cut and thrust and all that, you're hiding it here, like this. So this is good if you've just drawn it, you're here, and you just want to maybe block or cut, maybe like a Muay Thai elbow and keep it tight. But it's basically just a modified ice pick, so I don't really consider it its own thing. The same strengths and weaknesses apply with this as with this. The only thing is, you could use this as a brace to block a heavier weapon. There's historical evidence that this was actually used with longer, like parrying daggers. You could brace it against your forearm and use it as a shield to pass and then cut. So that's something to consider, but not really its own grip. Okay, last general things, and then I'll kind of get to which ones I prefer. If you have this traditional either hammer or saber grip, you need to be conscious of where you're mounting the weapon on your body. Because if you're going to deploy it, say it's in this position here, and you prefer to fight in a hammer grip, if you pull it out like this, it's very difficult to pull it out completely out of the sheath and deploy it into this position. It's much easier to have it in this position. You just reach down, pull it out, and you're good to go. So the solution for that, because I personally prefer this grip, is you do either an opposite side, so you cross reach to deploy, or if you're like geared out or whatever, you can do a cross body and just have it on your chest here, or and then you just pull across and then you're ready to go. So just keep that in mind as well. Okay, so what do I think of the grips? Which ones do I prefer? Me personally, I prefer Saber Grip for almost everything. Either this variation of the Saber Grip or this variation. Like I said earlier, for general like sparring, if we're doing like first to hit kind of stuff, I tend to prefer this one because it's quick, it's accurate, and I don't really have to worry about someone just charging in like a bull in a china shop. If we're doing more of a, real life application, I prefer either this one or this position because these are more secure and they're more friendly to fast, gross motor movements, as opposed to this one, which is more of fine work. If I'm in the ice pick position, which I find myself sometimes, I tend to just use the basic ice pick, kind of in a boxing guard, and I'll use it for a jab, or I'll use it for the downward hooking thrust, and maybe just a little hook slash work. But the hooking slash doesn't really work that well against someone who's resisting. So for me, general preference, this is my favorite, followed closely by this, followed by this, and then I don't use this one. I don't use, this or this pretty much at all.